1,000 years of democracy in the Palace of Westminster. Now, as we are moving, we're going to swing round by the looks of it, but if you look as we turn around over to your right-hand side, tucked in, this side of that red bridge on the south bank, so it'll be on your right-hand side as we turn, you can just see the red brick building that is Lambeth Palace, yet another palace. That was built about 500 years ago in that red brick style of the Tudor kings at the time, and that is the home, the London home or palace of the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the Church of England. No, not the Tower, that's part of the hospital. A little bit further along, before the modern glass building on the right hand side now, low lying, a bit difficult to see because the sun's behind it. There's a flag on top, that is Lambeth Palace. The Archbishop of Canterbury is the most senior churchman in the Church of England. And of course he needed a palace in London to be close to the Palace of Westminster and the King. So now we're heading east. And you'll get another good look at the Houses of Parliament on your left-hand side. Now on your right-hand side is St Thomas's Hospital. St Thomas's Hospital is one of the oldest hospitals in London, and you may be amused to know that that is where Boris Johnson spent a critical period in 2020 when he got COVID. He went to St Thomas's Hospital and it was a bit touch and go for a bit. He suffered really quite badly, and it was from that moment that he started taking the pandemic seriously, when he realised it wasn't just a head cold and a bit of flu. St Thomas's Hospital is one of the oldest hospitals, albeit it used to be further east in a different part of London, got moved here when the railways needed the land that it was based on, and it moved here to Westminster. It's also where Florence Nightingale, the Lady of the Lamp, the mother of English nursing, established a training college for young nurses. They're still to this day known as Nightingales. She established standards of hygiene in nursing that's still used to this day. So on your right-hand side, County Hall, the former home of the Greater London Council, and of course the London Eye, which some of you rode on a couple of days ago. That has been there since the year 2000. It was initially meant to be a temporary structure, but it proved so popular. It's not a Ferris wheel, it's an observation wheel. The difference being that in a Ferris wheel, the pods or the seats in which you sit hang down in the middle. And these are on the outside. There are 32 pods, they each hold between 25 and 30 people. So, you do the maths. I think that's about, is it 8,000 or 800? I was never very good at maths. Anyway, takes about 15 minutes to get to the top in one of those capsules, and 15 minutes to come down the other side, and you get a view from the top over 40 kilometres. You can see all the way out to Windsor, where we were yesterday, from the very top on a clear day. Not that we get many clear days in London at this time of the year, but today's one of the exceptions. Apparently, if you hire one of those pods privately, it's popular at the top for a marriage proposal. Just a bit awkward if anyone says no. You've got to spend 15 minutes coming down and So on your left-hand side now, you can see the Tattershall Castle. Got loads of castles around here, but that one's actually a floating pub where you can go if you get motion sickness on top of a few beers. Perhaps not recommended, but that's where you can go and enjoy a pint with a view over the Thames, left-hand side, the Tattershall Castle. Now we're going under the Golden Jubilee bridges. It's one of our many bridges in London. As I said, there are about 30 within London, and these two bridges with the white structures either side of a railway bridge were opened to celebrate the Queen's Golden Jubilee when she'd been on the throne a mere 50 years in 2002. That links a cultural quarter of London to Charing Cross Station. So that railway bridge goes into Charing Cross Station, linking trains to the southeast of England. Give them all away, that's right. So on your right-hand side, as we come under the bridge, you'll see the Royal Festival Hall and the National Theatre, part of a cultural centre of London, established from the mid-19th century, popular for concerts, for theatre, art galleries, and all established there in 1951. The aim was to lift the spirits of the British people after the Second World War. So you've got, and it's really always been, the South Bank has always been the entertainment side of London, because for a long while theatres were banned from the city of London, the old core of London, because they were associated with drunkenness and bawdy behaviour. So they put all the theatres outside the walls of the city of London. And people used to cross the river, not by bridge, because there weren't that many bridges, but by water taxi, little road boats, to go and have fun on the South Bank, and that's still reflected there. On your left-hand side, if you look up, you can see the former headquarters of Shell Mex, and it's got a big clock up there, which is actually even bigger than the clock face of the Great Clock of Westminster, i.e. Big Ben. That's often referred to as Big Benzine, reflecting Shell, the oil company. Big Benzine, not Big Ben. This is Waterloo Bridge, actually built towards the end of the Second World War, when many of our men were away fighting in the Second World War, so it was built by ladies, often referred to as the Ladies' Bridge. It's particularly solid and strong, this bridge, having such a good workforce. So on the right-hand side now, you see that cement building, that's our National Theatre. It's got 3 theatres inside there of different sizes. Slightly different from many West End theatres, because it's built long and low and wide rather than narrow and tall, but actors and people who work there love it. It was designed by a man who never built a theatre before, but he went and spoke to all the actors and found out what they needed. If you look to the left now, on the North Bank, that's Somerset House. That's another big cultural centre. It houses the Courtauld Gallery, a beautiful art gallery of particularly Impressionist paintings, Impressionist and post-Impressionist paintings. So some of Van Gogh's paintings are there, Manet's famous paintings. A lovely place to go if you're interested in Impressionist art. Now, as you know, I think I've told certainly my group, we give our skyscrapers nicknames in England. Usually they're reviewed by a journalist and he will say, well, it looks a bit like a walkie-talkie or a cheese grater, and suddenly that name will stick. So on your right-hand side, that building with the large bulge on one side is sometimes referred to as the Boomerang, and at other times it's referred to as the Kim Kardashian. I'll leave you to imagine why. Other people call it the pregnant lady, it all depends. But just in front of that, a little bit in front of that, you can see a tall tower which at the top says OXO, OXO. That used to be the site of a beef factory that produced beef stock. And it was built in the times before advertising was allowed. But the designer, the architect who built it, was rather clever, and he built the name of the factory into the windows at the top of the tower, so you can see OXO, which was advertising the name of OXO beef stock cubes. So he got round. It's now converted into flats and restaurants, quite a nice place to live, but we call it the OXO Tower. Ahead of us, straight ahead, if you can see out, you can see the tower that the journalist nicknamed Walkie Talkie. It's got a curve in it. You can just imagine picking it up and making a call. And that one was so badly designed that when the sun shone on it, it reflected the sun off at such high temperatures that it actually burned the paint of cars on the pavement below. So that one was a complete fail. It's one of London's least popular designs, the one straight in front of us on the other side of this coming bridge. On your left-hand side now, you can see the magnificent dome of St Paul's Cathedral. That has been standing there proud for over 300 years and symbolises the determination and resilience of Londoners. It was built after the Great Fire of London in 1666, which destroyed most of the city of London, and it was built as the first Protestant cathedral following the English Reformation. That is when King Henry VIII, the fat one with 6 wives, when he established the Church of England, because the Pope wouldn't let him divorce his first wife, Queen Anne Boleyn. Now we're going under Blackfriars Bridge. Blackfriars actually appears to have 2 bridges. One of them is a railway bridge, and on the top of it are solar panels which provides all the power it needs to power that station. You can get into the station at either end, and the station spans the whole stretch of the bridge. Does anybody know Mission Impossible? Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible 6. Tom Cruise was filmed running all the way along the buildings here. He does his own stunts, as you know. He ran all the way along the top of Blackfriars Bridge and then jumped in through a window, much to the surprise of the people who were working inside. So we're now coming up to our newest bridge. It's called the Blade of Light. Actually, it's called the Millennium Bridge because it was designed to connect St. Paul's on the left-hand side with this magnificent modern art museum. That's Hodel Gallery. That holds our collection of modern art and contemporary art, and it's built in a former power station. That was Bankside Power Station. This bridge here is officially known as the Millennium Footbridge, but actually we call it affectionately the Wobbly Bridge, because after it had been designed and built at huge expense, it was opened in the year 2000, and then immediately people noticed that it wobbled. And as everyone adjusted their steps in line to try and accommodate the wobbling, it wobbled even more. And so they had to close it and spend millions of pounds redesigning it. So it's known as the Wobbly Bridge. Any Harry Potter fans here? Because it features in the Harry Potter film of the Deathly Hallows, where the Death Eaters fly down the River Thames and they cause the Wobbly Bridge to wobble so much that it falls over. If you look to your right-hand side now, you can see Shakespeare's Globe. That is a scale reproduction of Shakespeare's theatre. As I told you, the theatres would have been on the South Bank. It's actually a modern reproduction built by American actor and director Sam Wanamaker, who was so surprised when he came to England to find there was no reconstruction of the globe that he organised it. It became his life's work to establish the land, to purchase the land and build it. And it's all built in the style as it would have been done. It has no roof, so you stand in the middle, you get wet, but you still see some great theatre. And it plays Shakespeare in 16th century plays to this day, mostly in summer, but it really is very cold. In winter, on the right-hand side, you can see a very old pub with red painted doors and window frames. That's called the Anchor Pub. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague who knows this end of town so much better than me. I feel I've exhausted myself here. The Anchor Pub, that was said to have been one of the many places on the South Bank where William Shakespeare himself would enjoy a pint. So we're now in the oldest part of London, the City of London, city with a capital C. And although it looks like the newest part, it's both the oldest part and the newest part. If you look up now to the left-hand side, you can see the monument to the Great Fire of London, a golden urn on the top of a tall column just in front of the walkie-talkie. That was built to remember the fact that 13,000 houses were burnt down in 1666, the year of the build, when a fire started in a lane in a baker's shop. He forgot to put out his fire, and the whole of London burnt down as a result of one careless baker. So we're now going under London Bridge. This was the first bridge in London. It's been a bridge in one form or other has been here since the 1st century, when the Romans arrived and built a bridge, and as they built a bridge to cross the river, they created a settlement which they called Londinium. It is less beautiful than the bridge in front of you, which is Tower Bridge, but is much, much newer. It was only built at the end of the 19th century. Tower Bridge, famous, an iconic symbol of London. It opens up in the middle. That is called a bascule bridge. It's both a bascule bridge, a lifting bridge. It opens up to let big ships through the middle, and river traffic has priority over road traffic. So once, when President Clinton was here, was going across the river to meet Prime Minister Blair for dinner on the other side, a ship needed to come through, The bridge lifted up, and President Clinton with his wife Hillary had to wait for a ship to go past. So time and tide wait for no one, not even the President of the United States. He had to wait while the bridge lifted and then closed again. On your right hand side now you can see HMS Belfast. That's a floating museum, but that is our last most significant surviving Second World War battleship. It saw action in D-Day, the D-Day landings, also in the Korean War, and spent time accompanying the Northern Atlantic, the convoys to Russia in the Northern Atlantic. And that's now a museum which you can go and visit. And on your left-hand side, you can see the Tower of London. The Tower of London, which is big enough to be a castle, but we never call it a castle because it all began with one tower, William's Tower, when William the Conqueror marched on London and built a big fortress. The Londoners weren't very pleased to see him, so he built a big tower at a time where people lived in low-lying wooden houses. He built a 90-foot tower to say, I am here to stay, I am your new king, whether you like it or not. The tower has been enlarged over the years and now has 2 curtain walls with lots more tower all around it. 22 towers in total, but as I say, we never call it a castle, we always refer to it as the Tower of London. And that's where we're going to go. We're going under Tower Bridge, we're going to swing round to the left, and we're going to get off at St Catherine's Dock. Am I right in saying? Hope I'm right in saying. If we're going any further, I'm going to have no idea what else I have to talk about. I'll hand the mic over to one of my colleagues. We're going to get off, we're going to walk back to the tower. So, give the people on Tower Bridge a wave. Were we to head out even further east, you get to the Docklands. So, before World War I, London was the largest dock in the world. Before World War II, London was the largest dock in Europe. And after about the 1960s, London really ceased to be an important dock at all because the river was too small for the large container ships to come in. So all the warehouses and docklands on either side of the river have been converted since into flats, places for people to live. And even further out, where you can see more of the towers, more of the skyscrapers, our second financial centre. So we're going to swing round and come in to one of those old docks.
You can see the mud on either side of the river because we're at low tide. This is a tidal river, moves up and down twice a day with the tide coming from the sea in front of us. And when the mud is exposed, you can see those people. Can you see them, those people on the left looking for things? People come with metal detectors because the tide churns up the mud at the bottom of the river and churns up lots of interesting things. Because we've talked about the history from the Romans through the Saxons, the Vikings, the medieval times. Lots of things are churned up and they appear in these mud flats on the side of the river twice a day. And when people find them, you know, they can get some money for them or they will be then put in the museum, yeah? All sorts of things have been found in that mud. But in the 18th century, 17th century, the punishment for... We've just been talking about all the ships that used to come up the river from the British Empire. There were so many ships at one time that the whole river would be blocked with ships waiting to unload. And they said that you could hop along the ships to cross the river. You didn't need to get a little ferry boat. So many people used to rob the ships because they'd be there waiting to unload. And the punishment for pirating and that sort of thing was to be tied up at lowest tide. You can see rings on the side of the wall tied up on a ring by the side of the river, and the tide would wash over you 3 times and drown you. That's what the punishment was for pirating. If you look on your left, the big tower, glass tower, this is the Shard. This is the newest tower in London, and this is the largest tower, the tallest tower in Western Europe, 306 meters high, commissioned by the Sheikh of Qatar and designed by Renzo Piano. It's half commercial, half residential. There's a hotel called the Shangri-La inside, and 3 restaurants, and you can go up it and get a fantastic panoramic view of London. And below it you can see a round glass building. This is the home to the City Hall, where we've got the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, designed by Norman Foster, who was the architect of the Millennium Bridge, and the Gherkin, which we will see in a moment, which is part of the group of buildings in the city. It's now where the Brazilian bank Safra, they own it now. We will see the Gherkin in a moment. So more people searching the side of the river. You can imagine this river goes up and down twice a day. It's absolutely amazing. But not so much traffic. Where the 2 lights are is where Tower Bridge opens. Each side of that bridge weighs 1,000 tons. And can you imagine? It opens in 90 seconds. Now, before the Second World War, that bridge used to open 33 times a day in 90 seconds, and it was opened by steam engines, because that was what, before electricity, that's what used to power things. Nowadays, it only opens to a couple of times a day because ships don't come up here anymore. But Skul Bridge, 2,000 tons lifted in 90 seconds. 1958, I think it was, a double-decker bus was coming along that bridge, and there was no warning bell. Now there's a warning bell, and there's a fence that drops down that closes, so you can't move. But in those days, he didn't know, and the bridge was opening, and the driver of the bus had to make a decision. What do I do? Do I carry on? And he did. And he flew across the gap. Can you imagine a double-decker red bus? But everybody was safe, didn't fall over. But nowadays that's impossible to happen. The 2 bridges at the top were closed for a long time because people used to commit suicide off it, jump into the river. There was a lot of robbery going on up there. You can imagine the time of Jack the Ripper. All this area where Jack the Ripper used to work, should I say, because you can imagine in those days everything was powered by coal, so every house had a fire in it, smoke coming out the chimney, all the factories, smoke coming out the chimney. This smoke mixing with the humidity of the river caused the London fog. You've heard a lot about the London fog, and so it was very easy for people to rob people, and up on those things there was a lot of robberies, so they were closed down, and now they've been opened again, and there's a glass walkway, so you can actually see, you can actually see down from the top when you walk along. So it's very interesting to go and you see all the mechanism, all the engineering machines that opened up the bridge, and you see the history of that bridge. Opened in 1894, but it looks a lot older, doesn't it, because the design is Gothic, neo-Gothic, made to look very old because it's next to the Tower of London, which is the oldest building in London, and they wanted to make it look old.
Oh, if I can get the double-decker bus.
But you can see the tide. Can you see that green line on the bridge there and on the walls? That's where the tide will be a bit later on. Twice a day it goes up to that and then drops and shows all the mud at the side of the river. Now, you might look at the water and think, oh my God, that doesn't look clean because it looks, you know, grey. Well, that's because the mud is churned twice a day. But it's a very clean river. It's one of the cleanest rivers going through a city in Europe. 100 species of fish in this river. Even a family of seal further down the river. But it never used to be like that. Before 1858, this river stank to high heaven. The year of 1858 was called the Big Stink, because the smell was so awful, the Houses of Parliament had to close down. They couldn't work because of the smell. And Queen Victoria, who had a cruise along the river with her husband, Prince Albert, it was cancelled, and she was very annoyed. And she said, we need to do something about this river. It smells horrible. And an engineer called Joseph Bazalgette said, leave it to me.